There are ordinary people who go about their lives quietly, blending into history without leaving so much as a scratch. Then there are those who burn so brightly, so fiercely, that even centuries later, their names refuse to die. Imagine a teenage girl, not a queen, not a warrior, not even someone from a noble family, but a simple peasant, claiming she hears the voices of saints. Now imagine this same girl marching straight into the heart of medieval politics, telling kings what to do, commanding armies, humiliating professional soldiers, and terrifying the most powerful empire of the time, all before she turns 20. You might think I'm describing the plot of a fantasy novel, but no, this is history woven into theater, a story so wild and unbelievable that if it weren't true, no one would dare write it. Our story begins in 1429 AD, a year when France was in more trouble than a candle at a wind festival. The English had invaded, the 100 Years' War had dragged on for, well, far too many years, and the French crown was clinging to legitimacy by a thread thinner than a monk's patience. Enter a young country girl from Domrémy, no fancy titles, no noble blood, and no military training, who insists she's been chosen by God to save France. People call her the Maid, though we might call her the teenage girl who refused to take no for an answer. She marches up to Robert de Baudricourt, a local captain, demanding horses and armor. Why? Because she has an urgent appointment with Destiny, and apparently Destiny requires chainmail. Naturally, Baudricourt thinks she's either mad or joking. But the Maid doesn't leave. Days pass. Weeks even. Finally, impressed, or perhaps just exhausted by her persistence, Baudricourt gives in. He gives her what she asks for and sends her off to see the Dauphin, the future king of France. Now, the Dauphin is not exactly the image of a heroic leader. He's hesitant, uncertain, and about as interested in military strategy as a cat is in taking a bath. But the Maid is undeterred. When generals dismiss her and courtiers snicker, she remains steadfast.
Get the phone out of my face!
Then she gets a private audience. And somehow, with her unwavering confidence and divine conviction, she stirs something in the Dauphin. He decides, against all odds and all common sense, to give her a chance. After all, as he probably reasoned, France couldn't possibly get any worse.
You're damn right.
With her banner in hand and a small army behind her, the Maid heads to Orleans, a city that's been under English siege and is hanging by a thread. There, she meets Commander Dunois, a seasoned soldier who explains that they must wait for favorable winds before attacking. But the Maid doesn't wait. Waiting isn't in her vocabulary. She declares that God is on their side and they should attack now. And as if on cue, because the universe loves a dramatic entrance, the wind changes direction. Dunois, now convinced that this teenage girl might actually know what she's doing, or that she has divine Wi-Fi, pledges his allegiance. And just like that, the tide turns. The French army, under the Maid's guidance, storms Orleans and achieves a stunning victory. Meanwhile, in the English camp, things are going poorly. Losses mount, morale plummets, and the only logical explanation? Witchcraft, of course. Warwick, the English commander, and his chaplain, de Stogumber, are convinced that no mortal woman could possibly achieve such success. They label her a sorceress, because in medieval logic, if you're losing, it's probably magic.
Sorcery.
But the concerns about the Maid go far beyond battlefield frustration. Bishop Cauchon, one of the most powerful churchmen, worries that she's promoting the dangerous idea of personal conscience over church authority. Meanwhile, Warwick fears something even more radical. She's telling ordinary people to pledge loyalty directly to the king, rather than their feudal lords. And if that wasn't enough, she's encouraging people to love their country, France or England, more than the universal church. These ideas are revolutionary, subversive, and utterly terrifying to the powers that be. And so, for their own reasons, both the church and the English agree, the maid must die.
Wait, what?
But before they get their chance, the maid delivers on her promise. She drives the English back and leads the Dauphin to be crowned king in the Grand Cathedral at Reims. The crowd cheers, the king beams, and France rejoices. And the maid, she's already thinking about the next campaign, capturing Paris and pushing the English out completely. But now that the crown is firmly on his head, the king suddenly loses his appetite for war. Dunois is cautious. The archbishop disapproves of her growing pride, and everyone starts treating her like a guest who's overstayed her welcome.
Oh, that's cold.
The maid realizes that she stands alone. Like the saints before her, she must continue without the support of crown, army, or church. She's warned that if she's captured, no one will lift a finger to save her. But she marches forward anyway. 9 months later, the prophecy comes true. She is captured, imprisoned, and put on trial for heresy. For months, she's interrogated about the voices she claimed to hear, the saints who guided her. Under immense pressure, torture, and the threat of death, she breaks. She confesses that the voices were not divine but demonic.
Oh, snap.
Her judges sentence her to a lifetime of solitary confinement on nothing but bread and water, a punishment so grim that even death seems merciful. The maid tears up her confession, choosing the stake over slow starvation. She is burned as a witch, and in one final act of defiance, her heart refuses to burn. But history isn't finished with her yet. 25 years later, a new court overturns her conviction. The same judges who condemned her are now condemned themselves. She is declared innocent of all charges. And then, in a remarkable leap forward, the story jumps to 1920. The Church, the same institution that once called her a heretic, now declares her a saint. She is canonized, immortalized, and venerated. But when given the chance to return to life, those around her hesitate. They fear her presence, her boldness, her challenge to their comfort. And so she asks the most haunting question of all.
O Lord, how long before the world will be ready to accept its saints?
This extraordinary story comes from George Bernard Shaw's brilliant historical drama, Saint Joan, first performed in 1923. It's not just a retelling of Joan of Arc's life, it's a profound exploration of power, faith, politics, and the uncomfortable relationship society has with truth-tellers. What makes this play so remarkable is not just its historical accuracy, but its depth. Shaw wasn't interested in writing a simple heroic biography. He wasn't trying to romanticize Joan or turn her into a saintly caricature. Instead, he gives us a deeply human portrait of a girl who is both extraordinary and ordinary at the same time. Joan's strength isn't in her sword or strategy, it's in her conviction. She's a symbol of conscience against authority, of idealism against cynicism, and of faith against bureaucracy. Shaw presents her not as a mystical figure, but as someone who dares to question the structures that keep power in place. It's telling that both church and state, despite being at odds with each other, find common ground in wanting her gone. She threatens the church's spiritual monopoly and the state's political order. She's too bold, too disruptive, too alive. And so, like so many truth-tellers throughout history, she's silenced. But Shaw doesn't end the story with her death, because history didn't. He forces us to reckon with how societies treat their visionaries, ridicule them in life, praise them in death. And that final line, how long before the world will be ready to accept its saints, hits like a thunderclap. It's a question that still resonates today. Think about how often society resists those who speak uncomfortable truths. How often we label them extremists, lunatics, or troublemakers, only to later celebrate them as heroes once they're gone. Joan's story is a mirror held up to our own times, and the reflection isn't always flattering. George Bernard Shaw was, honestly, one of the most influential playwrights of the 20th century, known for using drama as a vehicle for ideas. Born in Dublin in 1856, Shaw was a master satirist, critic, and thinker whose works often challenge societal norms and, well, forced audiences to question their assumptions. He wrote St. Joan just 3 years after Joan of Arc was canonized by the Catholic Church, and the play is often considered one of his greatest achievements. In 1925, Shaw was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, an honor he famously accepted but refused the prize money for. What makes Shaw's work endure is his refusal to offer easy answers. He doesn't tell us what to think, he makes us think. And St. Joan is perhaps his most powerful invitation to do just that. This isn't just a play about a girl who heard voices or a martyr burned at the stake. It's a story about courage, the kind of courage that shakes empires and outlives centuries. It's about how dangerous it is to listen to your conscience when the world demands obedience. And it's about the tragic truth that societies often prefer their saints dead rather than alive. So, the next time you hear about someone challenging the status quo, remember the Maid of Orleans, the teenage girl who refused to stay silent, who changed the course of history, and who still asks us, centuries later, how long before the world will be ready to accept its saints? If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most powerful stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Because stories like these remind us that history isn't just about the past. It's about the future we choose to build. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you're interested in diving deeper into this book, I've left some links down in the description. You can use it to grab yourself a copy and keep the adventure going. And if you're in the mood for more great reads, don't go just yet. Click on one of the videos popping up right now that I think you'll love. And don't forget to give this review a like, leave a comment, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more. Every bit of support helps us grow this little community of book lovers. See you in the next one.